Welcome to the Ascend Growth AI podcast, where we mix smart growth moves with a little AI magic. I'm Teresa. Let's dive in. For today's guest, we have David McDougall, managing partner at DGM Business Advisors. With more than 40 years of experience in franchising, from starting his career at Denny's and now to becoming CEO of Backyard Burgers and Your Pie Pizza, to now advising emerging franchisors, including technology companies, David has seen franchising from every angle. So, David, welcome to today's podcast.
Teresa, my pleasure.
Can you start by sharing your journey with us?
Sure. I mean, years ago, and this goes back quite a ways, but starting as a dishwasher in a Denny's restaurant and honestly working every position throughout Denny's in a particular restaurant, learning all facets of the business. From there, having the opportunity to open new locations across the country as Denny's was growing very quickly back then, and then moving into the restaurant management side of it. And that was an assistant manager, store level manager, etc. So I've really had an opportunity to understand how to run a restaurant, what it takes to run one successfully, profitably. And so through that journey, it certainly led up to other opportunities that came my way, and working with a variety of different brands in different capacities, kind of working my way up the ladder to senior level management, et cetera, to eventually being a CEO, and doing that for over 10 years with two different restaurant companies, one being more of a turnaround situation, and then the other really being more of a growth situation, but both franchised. Most recently, I've kind of ventured out on my own and really trying to take that knowledge and experience to work with folks that are, maybe new to franchising or starting a franchise business. In some cases, it may be an existing franchise that I use kind of the term has stuck and needs to kind of retool their processes, maybe how they're approaching development, et cetera. And I'm, the other part of it too, honestly, Teresa, is, how I can help that next generation of business leaders and business owners as they start their journey in business ownership.
That's very nice. What does DGM Business Advisors focus on today, and what kind of companies do you typically work with?
Yeah, it is kind of a variety. I can say that it's both. I've been involved with a couple different technology companies. One that specifically focuses on network services, another that focuses on integration challenges and has an integration platform utilizing AI to connect all the disparate different applications a company may run. It's amazing to me these days the hundreds of different softwares, applications, when you think of all the various departments that operate within an organization, and certainly as you get larger, certainly many more. But then how can you get the data out of those so that is useful and helpful to the people having to make decisions? And that was kind of a byproduct of the experiences I had, particularly as a CEO, having to deal with multiple locations, trying to understand how to get a consistent platform. But then when we wanted to bring in maybe a new program that had a new software, well, how do we get that to talk to everything that we already have that exists?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how both those companies kind of found me, and they were looking for just the experience I've had more from the franchise or franchisee operations side to help advise them as they're out, looking for new clients and also working with their existing clients.
What geographic region do you typically serve?
I work across the United
Okay.
States, to be honest.
Yep.
So I've, got a client out in California. Yeah, there's a couple here in Atlanta, one down in Florida. So these days, obviously, with Zoom and Teams and Google Meets and all the different technologies to communicate, but it is important to go see people too, and I do make it a point to do that.
Okay. So franchise culture is something that you're very passionate about, right? So what advice would you give on building a culture within a culture so the team feels ownership, loyalty, passion for the business?
No, that is a great question. And when you look at some of the most successful companies, whether it be food service or anywhere, there clearly is a well-established, defined culture, mission, vision, values. My experience really goes back to where I really saw the power of a mission, vision, and values was the time I spent at Cinnabon.
Mm. Hmm.
And quick story as a side note, when I was recruited there, I remember the trainer that was going to be kind of there for my initial orientation and kicking off the training had sent me kind of some pre-work and a package to prepare for day one. And one of them, and she was very clear about this, she said, make sure that you know our mission, vision, values by heart. You need to be able to recite it, not read it. And
Okay.
I went, okay, I never had this kind of happen before. And I'd come from a senior level position at a previous company, but I made sure that I knew what the mission, vision, values were. So when I reported the first day, and it was at a Cinnabon location, and we went through the orientation, I then presented to her, that I fully understood and knew the mission, vision, values. Well, fast forward a couple hours later, a gentleman comes by to introduce himself to me, and his name was Steve. And he was a local franchisee who operated 3 locations in the city really right next door. And one of the first questions he said, "Now, do you know our mission, vision, values?" And I'm yes. And and then he wanted to make sure that setting some expectations that he wanted to make sure that it was important to him that we work closely together. They'd had a great relationship with the previous, area manager, and he was certainly hopeful that we could have the same thing. Now, fast forward many, many years later, I would say that we became good friends. We stay in touch with each other, even though their business ownership, they still are a Cinnabon franchisee, but they also got involved in a number of other franchises and have been very, very successful in building their organization. And so, but what it really told me that really first day, within the first few hours, that the mission, vision, values of Cinnabon were very important across the organization.
Mm.
And to even have a franchisee who embraced them the way he did. And as time went on and I got to know him better along with his team better, it was very clear to me how important that was organizationally. And I guess I was told that, but I really got to see that in action. I would say for me, that was certainly one of the critical points of what led to that brand success.
Right. And so what is Cinnabon's mission vision?
Well, the mission was our guests say, wow. Very simple to understand. Everybody kind of knew that.
Okay.
Um,
I like that.
and this, you're testing me, Teresa, because this is years ago, but we act guests first. We are clean and attractive. We always deliver high quality. We are fast and we enjoy working here. Those were the 5 values. The vision, I probably wouldn't quite remember that, but I always felt those values were really the guiding principles of how we operated the locations, the bakeries. And it was important that all the team members knew that. And so then, from my standpoint, when you talk about culture, and even as a business owner, when maybe something isn't being done correctly, you can use the values as are we acting guest first? Did we treat, and guest first was attentive, cheerful, and timely is what it meant, ACT. But you were able to use that to tie back maybe performance deficiencies if they came up, or better yet, when something really good happened, you could say, wow, here's how you delivered on, these values. That to me is really how culture becomes ingrained in an organization when they're lived day to day.
Right. And you know what I like about their mission and vision and values is that it's very straightforward and very simple to understand.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times, and even as a business owner, as a franchisee, you kind of need to follow the brand, lines and standards. But sometimes, the culture in your business will clearly be different than what it might be in my business. At the end of the day, that's fine as long as you're delivering that guest experience. It's being done in such a way that it's the brand, it's positive for the brand, and that the customers are coming back and the business is profitable.
Franchises that you notice who don't have good culture, is it because they don't emphasize a lot of the mission vision or they don't understand it?
Well, businesses that I see that where there is maybe a culture problem, and you can kind of feel it. I mean, I don't know about yourself, when you walk into a business, whether it be a restaurant or any type of service related business, it becomes clear pretty quickly. Do people seem to like being here?
Mm,
Is the staff seem to be enjoying themselves? Do they like working there? And it doesn't take long. I mean, I usually you can sense that in a matter of seconds.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And that, so that kind of tells you, I wonder what's going on. Is it just quote a bad day, maybe, or is there more to it? And, sometimes I think we take for granted, just that you have people working for you and they have lives and they have stuff going on. And what's the old saying? You probably spend more time at work than you do sleeping or with your own family. And so you do want to kind of enjoy being at work and enjoy working with the people that you spend many, many hours with. And I think as an owner, it's creating that environment that, and hopefully putting the right team of people together that, one, are going to work hard, two, are going to be focused on the business at hand and servicing the customers well and delivering great products and a friendly and clean atmosphere. And those things, to make that happen and make it happen well, it takes good people. It takes people. And it takes people that are motivated and want to be there. And I always would say they're there at the end of the day, whatever brand's on the outside of the location, it really is the person who owns it or is operating it, because that's who they're working for.
Yeah, that's true. So you've seen cases where maybe the franchisor was not so clear on the mission vision, but the franchisee still had great culture in their stores.
And I've definitely seen that. I think that's one of the roles, though, in as a franchisor, is hopefully to have a clearly defined mission, vision, values that hopefully everyone's kind of in lockstep with. And occasionally you've got to go back and revise those things. And, I look at here in Atlanta, Chick-fil-A, I think everyone knows Chick-fil-A, but reading a couple books, on their success, their mission and vision and values has evolved and changed over time. I think the core principles are the same, but some of the wording, and you just got to keep up with the times and know who your audience is. And as your consumers kind of change and got Gen Zs and millennials, you do have to kind of adjust for those
Yeah,
things.
agree. That's true. So you mentioned AI earlier. Is there any places where you've seen AI being used very well in franchising?
Well, the last 2 years, AI has probably been, from a tech standpoint, the hottest topic of discussion.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, there's still a lot of unknowns in, how it can help a franchise system, how it can help in the support of franchisees, how it can help franchisees in the operations of their day-to-day business. Some of the areas that seem to be where you seem to be seeing it used pretty frequently is in training. I think from operations standpoint, just we think about writing operations manuals and standard operating procedures, doing presentations. I know that's kind of just skimming the surface of what the capabilities will be. Development, in terms of being able to target kind of a more specific franchise prospect that maybe is already out looking for a business opportunity versus just sending out marketing messages, in mass, but for a lot of people, it's not resonating because I'm not looking to buy a business or looking at business ownership. And so I think that's been helpful. And then some of the geofencing and targeting that way, and I've certainly seen through when I was talking about this integration solution provider. And if you think about, and they had to kind of draw this up for me, keep it pretty simple. Instead of writing, one of the biggest challenges when you bring in a new platform or a new program is, okay, how do we get it to integrate with our existing systems? And then you usually have to write some kind of integration. And most vendors that are selling you the new program or software will have the capability of writing those integrations and getting them up and running. However, where it kind of falls short and where they're not really, this is not our business, is down the road as your existing softwares are getting upgrades and things like that. All of a sudden, the integration's not working right because when you make upgrades of one thing, well, it affects something else. And so this particular company did if you think of a hub and a spoke, that you'd have all these various data sets coming into this hub and then utilizing AI to be able to scrub the data and then be able to get all the data points, whether it's for the marketing or the finance or ops, whatever reporting that they're looking for, being able to then disseminate that and get those reports in a way that are useful to the decision makers. And avoid having to write these expensive integrations because typically those, they're in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of programming work to get an integration done.
Exactly.
So they're trying to solve for that, but AI is also a key part of that.
That seems like a big problem to solve. So hopefully they figure it out. What is something in your career that you are proud of?
I would go back to when I first stepped into Backyard Burgers, and the situation was not good. It was they had invested in 2007. The company went through a very difficult 2008, 9, 10 during the Great Recession, and financially was really struggling. During that time, just a number of franchisees, unfortunately, it didn't work out. In 2012, the ownership decided they took the company into a bankruptcy. And I was contacted at the end of 2012 as, would you be interested in maybe coming in and seeing if you can get this turned around? And so I looked at it, talked to my family about it. This was in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm always up for a good challenge. And I did like the private equity group. I mean, this did not go as they had expected or wanted. It didn't for anybody. And when I got there, we did have our own company business, our company locations. We also had franchise locations. The franchisees were pretty unhappy and I would say kind of disenfranchised. They didn't really give much credence to what the franchisor said or asked them to do. The company employees were feeling pretty downtrodden also. There'd been no raises with tight cash flow, keeping the businesses, repaired and things like that had been a challenge. And so coming in, it was like, all right,
Yeah.
well, how do we fix this?
Right.
And really, it first took me just kind of making sure I had the right team. And it wasn't a matter of changing the team. It was just making sure I got everyone on board. And the majority were certainly up for the challenge. But I said, it isn't business as usual anymore. It can't be. And we've got to understand that we've got to work within the parameters and but we went, one of the first things I did was really went out on a listening tour. I went and met with many of our store level general managers. I met with our support team at the office. And then I also went out, I'd identified, through some of my folks who some of the key franchisees were, and made it a point to go out and meet them and talk to them. And frankly, it was just more to listen to what they had to say.
Right. Right.
And through that process, in some cases, letting them know I needed their help. I can't fix what the past is the past, but what can we do to create a new future? And we were able to do that. And within that first year, we started making some really positive headway, improving sales, which also then obviously afforded us. Then we did have some additional dollars to do some things like give performance reviews and raises, put a bonus program together for the company stores, have an all owner meeting, and be able to kind of set a plan for 2014 and beyond. 2014 ended up being a banner year, 2015. So and it was really, but I'll say this, Teresa, it was a team effort.
Mm.
I still talk to some of the folks that were part of that, and it was one of those things when you've been involved with something that it was very dire actually.
Yeah.
And the owners had said, listen, there's a limited amount of more money we're putting into this because we're frankly kind of done. And being able to turn that around and then help facilitate a positive exit for the ownership group was certainly to me a very positive, career. What I'd say for my career is being able because trust me, in my own mind, I'm going, can we fix this? There just seems to be so many. It's like anything else. You just had to do it one bit at a time, have a plan, and then just keep pushing and hopefully making progress, celebrating those wins, recognizing those that had really made outstanding accomplishments, and just from the back to your point earlier about culture, really redefining the culture and we did rework the mission, vision, values. It was a collaboration between some franchisees, company employees, and support team members, and came up with something that everyone at least would embrace. Was it perfect? No, but at least it gave us a direction.
Right. Well, that's something to be very proud of. Congratulations on turning that around. That's not everyone can do that. So congrats.
No, and well, thank you. It was a team effort, and everybody that was part of that, the franchise owners, our employees operating the restaurants, and those that were on the support team, and it was a small team.
Mhm.
They deserve all the credit.
Right. No, that's very nice. So besides culture, what's a common pain point for franchises?
I think as for a franchisee, it's just, understanding where does the support with the franchisor, what should they be able to count on and expect? What do they need to own?
Mm.
And, on kind of the highest level, the day-to-day operations, the functioning of the business that's the franchisee has to own that. The franchisor can't run the stores. The ability to attract and retain good people, that comes back to the owner. How you talk to them, treat them. One thing I think sometimes it's one thing to share with employees if we're having a business challenge and I need your help and here's what we need to do. But it's another thing if the owner is constantly complaining about we've got a problem because then the employees are like, oh, geez, I probably need to get out of here.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And because they're looking for that leadership from the owner. And then hopefully the owner also being a person of their word, whatever commitments they make, they do.
Mm.
Um, and so I do think that is important. I think franchisors have to also follow through on their commitments. They need to, I tell franchisors, communication is in my mind in a franchise system is the most critical aspect of what you do. And over communication is much better than under communication. And being able to give people, be as transparent as you can, have a frequency of how you communicate, whether that's a weekly newsletter, whether it's a monthly webinar, annual meetings, all those things. I also think, I would tell any executive visibility, getting out in the stores, meeting with franchise owners and their teams is really important.
Yeah. Right.
It's one thing to sit, in an office and get on Zoom, but face to face, in my mind, still is the golden rule. And not that you can be out there all the time, and hopefully you have people that can be.
Hmm.
I think as a franchisee, also, it's just you got to be engaged. The locations that I experience that struggle, I find that the ownership is not engaged. They've kind of defaulted it to somebody else, and yet that person maybe typically doesn't have the real decision-making authority to make decisions, spend money to get things done. And
Hmm.
and I would just say engagement, communication, participating. Yeah, things come up. We all get busy, but you got to be involved
Right.
and because it's your business.
Yeah.
And it's also the opportunity for you to be able to give your feedback and suggestions and recommendations. And most franchisors are pretty good about that. I would just say for anyone listening who's a franchisee, I think the toughest thing is being the franchisor is just you're never going to be able to make everyone happy. And there's lots of good ideas
Hmm.
and there's lots of good ways to do things, but where the franchisor comes is someone's got to make a decision. But we've got, it was an old saying, there's not much we can't do, but we just can't do everything at once.
Right. Right.
And when we do pick a path or pick an initiative, then let's make sure we execute it well and really put our resources against getting it done and doing a good job with it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's after many, many years in franchising. But again, for all franchisees is even when you might be mad, you might not have liked a decision that got made or some feedback that you got, but it's important. It's your business. You've made a huge investment and commitment. Obviously, you signed a lease, you signed a franchise agreement, you might have a loan, all those things. It's incumbent that you're involved and
Right.
engaged.
Exactly. No, that's great. Great advice. What advice would you give to your younger self if you were to start over again?
You learn a lot over time, and it is interesting in time how some beliefs change as it relates to business operations. I mean, running any business is hard, and how I might have done it back in the day isn't the way that you may do it today or anyone else, just because of the changing environment, how people have changed. But it still doesn't change the fact that you've got to deliver to your customers. At the end of the day, they hopefully will sing your praises, speak well of your business, come back frequently and tell those family and friends that, hey, you've got to go there.
Hmm. Yeah.
I would probably say I would be a little idealistic at times and not maybe try to understand maybe at a deeper level what if something wasn't working or going right or wasn't being executed correctly, why is that? Versus kind of just going right, well, it must be the people are bad, they're not doing a good
Mm.
job.
Mm.
When that may frankly have nothing to do with it.
Right.
That there was a fault in the process, it wasn't thoroughly tested. And so I think I've tried to in, this point of my life, what is when there's two opposing points of view or there's a conflict, you start to realize that the truth sometimes or usually lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Both are probably right, but both are probably wrong, but it's somewhere in the middle. And then how do you bring that to closure and move on?
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
You certainly can find me on LinkedIn. And I've got under my contact information, you'll have my cell phone number and email address. So I think make myself pretty accessible that way.
Okay, great. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Teresa. I've really enjoyed it and certainly want to wish you all the best and in future.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you got value, share it, tag us, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Catch you next time on the Ascend Growth AI podcast.